99 cents of every dollar collected. I want to read you a story about Social Security from my recent book, The Battle for Social Security, From FDR's Vision to Bush's Gamble. By the afternoon of September 11th, 2001, the Social Security Administration was in overdrive. The families of virtually every worker who perished that day were covered by the program. The daunting task facing Social Security was to identify those families, contact them, and help them secure the financial protection their loved ones had earned for them. A stay-at-home dad lost his wife in the World Trade Center on September 11th. In the midst of his grieving, he could see no way to remain at home with his child, nor support the child at the level they had been living. Unaware of the valuable Social Security benefits his wife had earned for her family through her work, he reluctantly put the family home on the market. The call from Social Security from out of the blue was a godsend. He hung up the phone and called his real estate agent. He could keep his home after all. On October 3rd, 2001, just 3 weeks after the terrorist attack, Social Security checks were mailed and electronically transferred, as they are every single month, to beneficiaries of the program. Included among the 47 million beneficiaries receiving Social Security checks that October 2001 were the stay-at-home dad, his young child, and thousands of members of other families who lost loved ones on September 11th. In the chaotic aftermath of that tragic day, millions of Americans reached into their pockets to contribute to the Red Cross and other charitable organizations assisting the families of the 9/11 victims. But the most immediate, sustained, and generous support came from Social Security. Today, virtually all working Americans continue to contribute to those families every payday. The money withheld from every worker's paycheck for Social Security goes into the program's Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund, out of which those victims' families receive benefits. Virtually every child who lost a parent in the terrorist attack will receive a Social Security check every month until his or her late teens. So will the children's surviving parents who care for them. As this story illustrates, Social Security is vitally important to everyday Americans. Through the protection of families, it's the nation's largest and most generous children's program. It's the nation's largest and most generous disability program. Indeed, American soldiers fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan who are disabled receive Social Security, as do their families, and fallen soldiers receive those Social Security checks too. And we all know how important Social Security is as the nation's most important retirement program. 2/3 of the elderly, and as Jim pointed out, his mother as well, 2/3 of the elderly receive half or more of their income from Social Security. Now, I know what many of you are thinking, but it's going broke. We can't afford it. Sure, it's a great program. The truth is that we can. Let me offer you some facts. Every year, Social Security's Board of Trustees issues a report projecting Social Security's financial status over the next 3/4 of a century, 75 years. This is another example of how conservative this program is. Most federal spending is projected out 10 years. No other pension plan in the country comes close to projecting out 75 years, but Social Security does it every single year. The latest trustees report, just issued a few months ago in April, projected a shortfall over the next 75 years of 1.95% of taxable payroll. To give you a sense of what that means, if an additional 1% were deducted from workers' wages and a matching amount were paid by employers, Social Security would be in surplus for the full 75-year valuation period. Now, I'm by no means advocating raising the contribution rate. There are much better ways to eliminate the projected deficit. I recommend 3 reforms, which are all sound policy in themselves, and they bring Social Security back into balance. And let me go through them very quickly for you, and we can talk about them more in the Q&A if you want. Number 1, in the next 10 years, Social Security is projected to have an accumulated surplus of $4.5 trillion. That's trillion, and that's surplus. The law requires that those funds be invested exclusively in U.S. Treasuries, which is a very safe investment, but a relatively low return. The law should be changed to permit Social Security to do what virtually every other pension plan does: diversify its portfolio and invest a portion of its reserves in equities. That's number 1. Okay, number 2. Social Security taxes are withheld from earnings each payday throughout the year unless and until the worker's earnings exceed a maximum amount. Many years ago, Congress set the maximum so that 90% of all workers of all the earnings of all the workers taken together would be below the maximum. So 90% or below. Only the top 10% of wages earned in this country would be above. 90% under the maximum, 10% above. Congress sought to make the 90% mark permanent by automatically increasing it every year by the average amount that everyone earns. Everyone's wages go up. However, the automatic adjustment has not worked as Congress intended. Because the wages of the highest paid workers have grown much faster than average over the last 2 decades, that 90% target has declined steadily, costing Social Security billions and billions of dollars in revenue. The second reform, number 2, is to restore the practice of collecting taxes on 90% of all covered earnings. The problem is that to do so all at once would create a big new expense for those earning just above the maximum. Fortunately, the Social Security deficit can be cut by 1/3, even when that 90% mark is restored extremely gradually over a period of decades. As I would phase it in, the most any taxpayer would experience in any given year is 1 additional week of withholding. If the proposal had been in effect this year, workers earning over $97,500, which is this 2007 maximum, would have had withheld only an additional $120.90. And those workers would receive higher benefits when they retired. So there are the first 2 proposals: diversify Social Security's portfolio, restore the practice of covering 90% of the nation's earnings. Finally, my third proposal: President Bush and this organization advocate the repeal of the federal estate tax. Instead, I believe it should be converted into a dedicated Social Security tax, and I have sound policy reasons for doing this. I know I am just about out of time, but I'm happy to explain in the question and answer period why this proposal is very good Social Security policy, very good tax policy, and very good social policy. These 3 reforms put Social Security in balance for the next 75 years through the year 2082, when Patrick, the student speaker on today's panel, will be in his 90s. I want to conclude with one final point. At a time when traditional pensions are being terminated at an alarming rate, when the account balances of 401k plans are depressingly low, and when overall savings in this nation are negative, we should address these inadequacies by increasing the part of the retirement income system that works the best, the one that covers everyone, the one that is most secure, the one that is most cost-effective, and the one that is most efficient. We should be thinking about increasing Social Security. I hope I'll be invited back on another anniversary of Social Security to discuss ways that Social Security benefits can be increased within the tried and true structure that has served this nation so successfully for the last 72 years.